what we know they have is this 6.4, whatever it is, $1 million mid-level tax exception that is not going to be, a day one use when free agency starts, in the middle of the week here. But, it's after vets sort of find out there's no money for them on the market and they start to examine, all right, all these teams can offer me the same amount of money, which is the best option for me. And they look at the contenders, obviously, there are going to be guys that are interesting pieces. And, there was an article and look, it's for you guys or anyone out there listening to judge whether you think these are even realistic or whether you want them or whatever. But, an article that caught my eye from NBC Sports Boston and one of the writers there, Darren Hartwell, wrote, listed 8 as he deemed them anyway. And I haven't gone into this to really, look at it, but he deemed them 8 realistic options that could bolster the team with that mid-level tax exception. And he listed TJ Warren, who, Corey, I know you have thoughts on, Otto Porter Jr., switching sides, Bruce Brown, who I just feel like at 25 is going to command a lot more money than that, but maybe I'm wrong. Patty Mills, could continue to bounce around. Gary Harris, Kyle Anderson, who again is another guy I feel like would make more money than that. Nick Batum, who we've heard linked to the Celtics, and I think and Isaiah Hartenstein was listed here as well on the subject of bigs. So whether Seth, because I know you wanted to say something too, whether it's one of those guys I just listed or somebody else who's on your mind, who do you think is a realistic fit for that money that the Celtics do actually have to spend right now?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few guys on that list that I don't think are. Hartenstein's under contract with the Clippers. Like, they're going to overpay. Like, the Clippers are the team that I wish, we were spending money because they just, throw money around as an advantage. Like, they see their willingness to spend money as a competitive advantage and actually use it that way. And Mills, I just think is a bad fit with this team defensively. But I love the TJ Warren idea. I would just like to briefly go back to the center thing. It's because there's there's 4 resources that we're talking about. It's the big $17 million TPE. There's a 6.9, I think, at a $5.9 million TPE. And then what you're talking about is the mid-level exception. So the TPEs you can only use to bring in guys who are already under contract. And then the mid-level exception could be any free agent. So you do have a little more freedom with that. But I think we saw last year, you can have a lot of pipe dreams about what you get with that taxpayer mid-level, and then you end up with Dennis Schroeder bogging down your offense for a bunch of months.
But there's just difference though between that team and this team now, because now
now we know it's a terrible idea to get Dennis Schroeder.
No, this is
well, now we know what their identity is.
Why did Patty Mills pick Brooklyn over Boston? Because Brooklyn had Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden at the time, and had way more street cred as an NBA Finals contender. Boston now is the team from the East that just lost in the NBA Finals. So now that destination is a little more attractive for maybe a guy trying to get one more contract and trying to TJ Warren. I honestly don't think. I just think very highly of TJ Warren, and I think that he could probably do better than that. But let's say if you're TJ Warren, you're
I'll played 4 games the last 2 years.
Yeah, well, let's just say if you're TJ Warren, I'll take the mid-level. I'll run the second unit for Boston when the Jays are on the bench. I'll score X amount of points a game, and then I'll get a look from somebody else that'll overpay for me. That's the scenario that Boston is now. That's the advantageous scenario that Boston's now put themselves into because of this finals run. Now there are other teams like this too. Milwaukee's gonna be bringing people aboard. We have this really interesting PJ Tucker 76ers rumor going on, which I find very interesting. The Lakers are always going to be there because of their LA status and the fact that they have LeBron and all that stuff. But Boston's now in that conversation, and it makes convincing someone of a TJ Warren status. Now, again, I don't know if it's going to be him, but convincing someone like that, yes, this is where you need to go to rehab your image, to spell us, and then parlay that into a ginormous deal somewhere else. Let's just call it is. You can do so much better than Dennis Schroeder at this point. And Schroeder, just didn't fit, and they tried like hell to make it work. But like once he left and Pritchard came in, it was just like, oh yeah, this is way better, right?
Just the part where he left is enough, actually.
Yeah, but like now that you're in this
Addition
spot,
by subtraction.
you can be a little more choosy about it, right? You can look around and say like, yeah, again, I don't think Patty Mills would be good for this team. Like I love Patty Mills, but like no, like he would get cooked on defense, and then offensively, like if he's not hitting shots, you have the same problem with Peyton Pritchard. Like it's just you don't want to create another problem like that. So it's just given their status now of finals contender versus last year coming off the year from hell, new coach, new system. Like what is this team? Now we know what they are, and it's easier for a guy to see the path to the next contract via this mid-level exception.
Yeah, I just I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think a year ago we couldn't. If we rewind it back here, we could not be having this conversation about TJ Warren. If it was in current day TJ Warren, it wouldn't even be on the table. It's on the table now for all those reasons, Evan. Like this, I mean, for 1 year, I mean, if I'm TJ Warren, certainly he can get more money than 6.3 this year. Absolutely, but if I was his friend, and I wish I was, I would tell him, now listen, go to Boston. They were 2 games away. They play defense, you play defense.
TJ Warren away.
Yeah, they play defense, you play defense. They're looking for a guy, a wing who's gonna be the 6th guy, kind of be the guy's gonna lead that second unit, potentially play key minutes in the playoffs down the stretch. That's you. And then let's revisit free agency in a year and really cash in. I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I just think this is sort of like a weird with his injury history and where he's come back from. It's weirdly aligned, where it just kind of makes sense. Like it could work for a year. So I'm getting excited, and I'll be disappointed, if it doesn't happen. But it could. It's very real. I think that it does make a lot of sense. He could certainly get more than what we can offer, but we, for once, really, for the first time in a long time, we offer a really, really unique situation to free agents. Really unique. Like, hey, this is fun. Look at what just happened. This team's having fun. They're young. It's not, take Al out of it. It's not like these guys are all 36, 37. Young, new coach, a young coach. This is a good place to be, even if it's just for a year.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with like all of that. I guess like to me, it does. I guess the downside I would just say is that it feels a little bit like what happens with the buyout market every year, where this like these same conversations come up, and like it's just so rare that those guys move the needle. So like when you're talking about that, like that's why the resource that we have, we being the Celtics have, that I want us to use is the $17.1 million or 17 million whatever it is trade exception, because like that's the piece where you can bring in somebody who's like a
Truly
real
impactful.
Yeah.
It's harder to do, though. I mean, that's the thing. And when you were saying earlier,
well, it's not, but they can. I mean, like they just have to spend the money.
They can do it. I mean, but you were saying earlier about Brad, and you sort of doubting what he was. He's sort of implying that they're not going to do it. My read of that situation was that he's saying that this is up in 3 weeks. I mean, it's a small window here to pull it together. I mean, it probably doesn't take that much time to pull it together, but it's about to expire. Right. So, there's, a lot of pieces need to fall into place. You need 2 partners to do it. So it's more, to me, I read it as don't think we didn't try if it doesn't happen, but it can be challenging.
That's why because it's expiring, I would say like that's why I laid out like the least of what they need to do. Like the thing where you just take on like a mediocre player who someone is trying to get off their books, just so you keep that salary slot as like a thing. If you get to the trade deadline and you need a piece to add,
right,
you don't have to trade one of your really good players. You can cobble together a bunch of players who aren't good. And that's why I sort of like those Knicks, like the guys the Knicks are trying to get rid of. It's not that I love those guys as players. It's like, if it doesn't work out, you either have the salary slot to move in a trade, or you just use the draft pick that came with those guys to unload them again then.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the next 2 largest TPEs that they have expire at the trade deadline. So it's not even like they need to be sort of focused on a million different things right now. Like the singular focus, other than I guess again the mid-level, the singular focus is that TPE. Like that's what you're working on right now.